Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who teach us the hardest lessons about betrayal. Grandpa had told me 3 weeks before his death, handing me a small wooden box with trembling hands. "Don't open this until the right moment comes, Ava. You'll know when." I didn't realize then how prophetic those words would become, or that the right moment would arrive at my brother Nathan's housewarming party, just 4 days after Grandpa's funeral. "I need to make a toast," Nathan announced, raising his glass as everyone turned to look at him. His eyes gleamed with the familiar excitement I'd seen countless times when he was about to steal the spotlight. "To new beginnings, new homes," and, he paused dramatically, to Grandpa's memory. A respectful silence fell over the room. Our grandfather had passed away just 4 days ago, and the wound was still fresh for all of us. I raised my glass along with everyone else, quietly honoring the man who had meant everything to me. The man who had taught me to see beauty in broken things. "Speaking of Grandpa," Nathan continued, setting his drink down on the coffee table, "I have an announcement to make." I watched as he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, slightly worn at the edges. My heart skipped a beat. There was something about the way he glanced at me that made me uneasy. "Before he died, Grandpa gave me this letter," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the living room of his new Denver home. "He wanted me to have his vacation home by the lake. The place we all loved as kids." The room erupted in surprised murmurs and congratulations. Our parents beamed with pride while Ashley, Nathan's fiancée, clapped excitedly. My cousin Lily shot me a confused look from across the room. She knew how close Grandpa and I had been, how I'd spent nearly every weekend for the past 3 years helping him maintain the lakeside property, listening to his stories about environmental conservation, and simply enjoying his company. Nathan, on the other hand, had visited maybe twice in the last 4 years, always complaining about the lack of Wi-Fi and nothing to do. But more importantly, Grandpa had given me that wooden box 3 weeks ago, making me promise not to open it until the time was right. As Nathan unfolded the letter and began to read what were supposedly Grandpa's wishes, I studied his face. Was he lying? Did he know about the box? Had Grandpa somehow changed his mind without telling me? The familiar knot of anxiety that had plagued me since childhood, the result of years of Nathan's manipulations, began to tighten in my chest. "That's great. Good for you, Nathan," I managed to say with a forced smile, though my mind was racing. I needed to get home and check the contents of that wooden box right away. I quietly excused myself, saying I needed to use the bathroom, and slipped away from the celebration. The letter Nathan had shown everyone didn't make sense. Grandpa's handwriting had become increasingly shaky in his final months due to arthritis, but the signature I'd glimpsed looked suspiciously smooth and confident. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "You okay?" That was weird. Nathan never even cared about the cabin. I texted back quickly, "Need to check something at home. Can you cover for me?" "Say I got called into work?" Within minutes, she had made my excuses to the family, and I slipped out the back door. The drive to my apartment felt surreal. Streetlights blurred as memories of Grandpa flooded my mind, teaching me to fish off the dock, pointing out constellations in the clear mountain sky, laughing at my terrible attempts to skip stones across the lake. The vacation home wasn't just property, it was where our most precious memories lived. It was our special place where Grandpa had taught me about resilience, patience, and finding joy in simple things. Nathan had never shown any interest in those lessons or the cabin itself. His announcement felt like a violation of something sacred. As soon as I got home, I went straight to my closet and retrieved the wooden box. Inside lay several neatly folded documents, a sealed envelope with my name written on it, and a small brass key I recognized immediately. It opened the antique roll-top desk in Grandpa's study at the cabin. I unfolded the top document and gasped. It was exactly as I'd feared, a notarized deed transferring ownership of the vacation home to me, dated 6 months ago. Alongside it was a letter in Grandpa's unmistakably shaky handwriting. "My dearest Ava. By the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. I've decided to give you the cabin while I'm still alive to avoid any complications. You're the only one who truly loved this place as much as I did. Your brother never showed interest except when he needed a place to host parties when I wasn't around. I know Nathan might contest this, which is why I've had everything properly notarized and filed. There's a copy with my lawyer, Thompson. The cabin is legally yours already, this isn't part of my will or estate. I trust you to honor the spirit of our special place. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Nathan had lied. He'd fabricated a letter, knowing full well Grandpa had already given the property to me. My phone buzzed with messages from my parents asking where I'd gone. Nathan had texted too, nice disappearing act. Don't worry, you can still visit the cabin if you ask nicely. That's when I knew what I had to do. I gathered the documents, tucked them back into the box, and checked the time. The party would still be going for a couple more hours. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and headed back to my car. It was time for the truth to come out. The drive back to Nathan's house gave me time to think. I wasn't going to cause a scene, that wasn't my style, and certainly not what Grandpa would have wanted. He'd always told me, when you have truth on your side, Ava, you don't need to shout it from the rooftops. The quiet truth hits harder than any loud lie. I parked a block away from Nathan's house, the wooden box secure on the passenger seat beside me. What would you do, Grandpa? I whispered, running my fingers over the box's smooth surface. The answer came almost immediately in my mind, the right thing, with grace. I decided not to go back into the party right away. Instead, I texted Lily, how many people are still there? She replied quickly, just family now. Most guests left after dinner. You coming back? This was perfect. I didn't want a crowd for what I needed to do. Taking the box, I walked the short distance to Nathan's front door. When I knocked, it was Nathan himself who answered, his expression shifting from surprise to wariness. Work emergency over already, he asked, his tone suggesting he didn't believe there had been one in the first place. We need to talk, Nathan, I said calmly, stepping past him into the house. Everyone looked up as I entered the living room. My father was examining what must have been Nathan's letter more closely, while my mother was already discussing renovation plans for the cabin with Ashley. Lily sat quietly in the corner, watching the scene with obvious discomfort. Ava's back, my mother announced unnecessarily. We were just discussing Nathan's wonderful news about the cabin. Actually, I said, setting the wooden box down on the coffee table, that's what I wanted to talk about. Nathan's eyes locked onto the box, recognition flickering across his face. What's that? He asked, though I could tell from his expression that he had a good idea. Something Grandpa gave me 3 weeks ago, I explained, keeping my voice level. He asked me not to open it until the time was right. I looked directly at Nathan. I think that time is now. Before Nathan could protest, my father leaned forward with interest. What is it, Ava? I opened the box and carefully removed the notarized deed and Grandpa's letter. 6 months ago, Grandpa legally transferred ownership of the vacation home to me, I said, laying the documents on the table for everyone to see. It's already mine. It's not part of his estate or will. The room fell silent. My mother's mouth dropped open while my father picked up the deed with a furrowed brow. Nathan stood frozen, his face draining of color. This is notarized, my father confirmed, examining the document. And this is definitely your grandfather's signature. That's impossible, Nathan finally sputtered. Grandpa gave me the letter. He wanted me to have the cabin. May I see that letter again? I asked, extending my hand toward my father. He handed it over, and I placed it side by side with Grandpa's handwritten letter from my box. The difference was stark and obvious. The handwriting on Nathan's letter was an attempt at imitation, but it lacked the telltale shakiness caused by Grandpa's arthritis. The signature was too perfect, too controlled. Nathan, my mother said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, did you forge this letter? His silence was answer enough. When Nathan finally spoke, his voice was a mixture of defiance and desperation. You don't understand. It's not fair that she gets everything. Everything? I echoed, genuinely confused. You were always Grandpa's favorite, Nathan said, his words rushing out like water through a broken dam. Always visiting him, always helping him, always the perfect grandchild. The rest of us barely got a look in. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. Nathan, regardless of how you feel, forging your grandfather's signature is serious. Let me see those, my mother interjected, reaching for both letters. She compared them side by side, her expression shifting from disbelief to disappointment. Oh, Nathan, she sighed. How could you do this? Ashley slowly stood up, her face pale. I think I should go, she murmured, avoiding Nathan's pleading look as she gathered her purse and headed for the door. Wait, Ashley, this isn't what it looks like. Nathan called after her, but she was already gone, the front door closing firmly behind her. The room fell silent again. Lily caught my eye and gave me a small, supportive nod. She had always seen through Nathan's antics, even when our parents couldn't. I don't understand, my father said finally, turning to Nathan. Why would you announce something like this without even checking if it was true? The will reading isn't until next week. Nathan's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. I found out about the deed, he admitted. I was at Grandpa's lawyer's office last week asking about the estate, and Thompson mentioned that the cabin wasn't part of it because it had already been taken care of. He wouldn't tell me more because of client confidentiality, but I knew what it meant. You knew? I asked, feeling a fresh wave of anger. You knew Grandpa had already given me the cabin, and you still tried to claim it? Nathan's eyes blazed. I just thought. I thought if I announced it first, maybe. Maybe what? My mother pressed. Maybe Ava would just let me have it. Nathan snapped, his voice rising. Maybe everyone would believe me instead of her for once. His words hung in the air, revealing a jealousy deeper than I had realized. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but understanding. Had he really felt that excluded from Grandpa's life? Nathan, I said quietly, Grandpa invited you to the cabin countless times. You always said you were too busy. Because I felt like an intruder, he shot back. By the time I realized what I was missing, it was too late. You two had your special bond, your inside jokes, your traditions. There was no room for me. My father shook his head, disappointment evident in his expression. That doesn't justify lying to the entire family, son. Nathan slumped into a chair, the fight seemingly draining out of him. So what happens now? He asked, not looking at any of us. You've made your point, Ava. You win. This isn't about winning, I said, thinking of Grandpa and what he would want. Despite Nathan's deception, he was still my brother, and Grandpa had loved him too, in his own way. I reached back into the wooden box and pulled out something I hadn't mentioned yet, a sealed envelope with Nathan's name on it, written in Grandpa's distinctive handwriting. He left something for you too, I said, holding it out to my brother. Nathan looked up, suspicion and hope warring in his expression. What is it? I don't know, I admitted honestly. Grandpa told me not to open anything that wasn't addressed to me. After a moment's hesitation, Nathan took the envelope and carefully opened it. As he read the contents, his expression shifted from defensive to shocked, and finally to something that looked like genuine remorse. He knew, Nathan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. He knew I might try to claim the cabin. My mother moved to sit beside him. What does it say, honey? Nathan hesitated, then handed her the letter. Read it, he said. Everyone should hear it. My mother adjusted her reading glasses and began. Dear Nathan. If you're reading this, then Ava has opened my cedar box, which means one of two things: either I'm gone, or something has happened that made her feel it was necessary to reveal its contents. I've known you since the day you were born, and I know your heart. You've always wanted recognition and validation, things I perhaps failed to give you in the way you needed. But I also know when you feel overlooked, you sometimes make impulsive decisions that hurt others and ultimately yourself. The cabin has been transferred to Ava. This was a decision I made with great thought and love, not because I didn't care for you, but because Ava connected with the place in a way you never did. She understood what made it special to me, and I trust her to preserve that spirit. What you need isn't a property, Nathan. It's a purpose. I've enclosed a check for $28,000. Use it to start something meaningful, find what makes your heart come alive the way the cabin does for Ava. Maybe it's that business idea you mentioned last Christmas, or perhaps something else entirely. I hope someday you'll understand that this isn't about favorites or fairness, it's about recognizing different paths for different hearts. Ava will keep the door open for you at the cabin, I have no doubt, but your future lies in building something of your own. With love and hope. Grandpa. When my mother finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Nathan sat with his head bowed, the check clutched in his trembling hand. He saw right through me, he murmured. Even from the grave. My father moved to place a comforting hand on Nathan's shoulder. Your grandfather was a perceptive man. Nathan looked up at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Ava. I had no right to try and take what was already yours. The words seemed to cost him, but they also sounded sincere. I nodded, not quite ready to offer forgiveness, but acknowledging his apology. There's something else in the box, I said, reaching for it again. I pulled out a small photo album and opened it to reveal pictures spanning years, Nathan and me as children at the cabin, building sandcastles by the lake, roasting marshmallows with Grandpa at the fire pit. He kept this in his desk at the cabin, I explained, turning pages to show more recent photos. He never stopped hoping you'd come around, Nathan. My brother stared at the photos, emotion washing over his face. I really messed up, didn't I? Yes, I agreed, not sugarcoating it. But Grandpa obviously thought you could do better. The room fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence, contemplative rather than tense, sad rather than angry. The evening had taken a turn none of us had expected, laying bare years of complicated feelings and unspoken resentments. The truth about Nathan's forgery had barely settled when the real storm began. A week after the confrontation at his housewarming party, I received an email from our family's lawyer. Nathan had filed a legal challenge to the cabin's transfer, claiming Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he signed the deed over to me. He's trying to invalidate the transfer, Lily explained when I called her in panic. Her voice was tight with anger. He's saying Grandpa's arthritis medication might have affected his judgment. The accusation made me physically sick. Nathan wasn't just trying to steal the cabin anymore, he was attempting to tarnish Grandpa's memory, to paint him as mentally incompetent in his final months. The months when he'd been more lucid and wise than ever. That evening, my phone exploded with notifications. Nathan had posted a lengthy statement on Facebook, positioning himself as the victim of a manipulative sister who had taken advantage of their grandfather's declining health. He'd even included carefully selected photos of Grandpa's shaky handwriting, presenting them as evidence of his deteriorating condition. Devastated to discover the extent of manipulation that occurred during my beloved grandfather's final months, he wrote. Sometimes those closest to us can be the most ruthless. #elderabuse #family betrayal. The comments flooded in, mostly from his business connections and social circle who only knew his version of events. Some called for me to do the right thing and return the property. Others suggested I should be investigated for elder abuse. Ashley, caught between loyalty to her fiancé and her own moral compass, remained conspicuously silent. My parents were torn apart by the situation. Mom, always eager to keep the peace, begged me to consider some kind of compromise. Dad maintained a troubled silence, his faith in his son shaken but his instinct to protect him still strong. Just split the property, Mom suggested during one particularly tense phone call. Sell it and divide the money. Is it worth destroying the family over? This isn't about money, Mom, I tried to explain. This is about what Grandpa wanted. About respecting his wishes. But your brother is trying to destroy Grandpa's reputation to get what he wants. How can you not see that? The situation escalated when Nathan hired a prominent estate lawyer who specialized in contesting wills and property transfers. The lawyer began reaching out to everyone who had known Grandpa in his final years, looking for any evidence of cognitive decline. That's when I discovered Nathan had gone even further. He'd been to the cabin while I was at work, using the spare key our parents still had. He'd removed items, family photos, documents, anything that might help his case. When I arrived the following weekend, I found Grandpa's roll-top desk had been forced open, its contents ransacked. Standing in the violated study, surrounded by scattered papers and empty folders, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. This was about stopping Nathan from destroying everything Grandpa had tried to preserve. I called Lily. "I need your help," I said. "We're going to fight back." Over the next few weeks, we built our defense. Lily helped me gather evidence, medical records showing Grandpa's mental clarity, witness statements from his doctors and friends, documentation of Nathan's previous attempts to pressure Grandpa into various financial decisions. Most damning of all was a video we discovered on Grandpa's old iPad. He'd recorded himself the day he signed the deed over to me, clearly explaining his reasons and demonstrating his sharp mental state. It was as if he'd known something like this might happen. "I'm recording this message," he said in the video, "because I know my decision to give the cabin to Ava might be questioned. I want to be clear, this choice is made with full awareness and careful consideration. The cabin needs a guardian, not an owner. Someone who understands that its value lies not in its property worth, but in its ability to keep our family connected to what matters." But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. Ashley showed up at my apartment one rainy evening, looking distressed. She handed me a folder containing screenshots of text messages and emails. "Nathan's been planning this for months," she said quietly. "Even before Grandpa died. He's been consulting with lawyers about how to challenge the transfer, gathering evidence of manipulation. She hesitated. He even talked about having some of Grandpa's signatures forged by a professional if necessary." "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Ashley twisted her engagement ring nervously. "Because the man I fell in love with wouldn't do this. And I can't stand by and watch him destroy his family and his grandfather's legacy for what? Money? Status?" She pulled the ring off and placed it on my coffee table. "I already emailed copies of everything to your lawyer." The evidence Ashley provided was decisive. Nathan's case collapsed within weeks. His lawyer withdrew, his social media posts were deleted, and the legal challenge was dropped. But the damage to our family was already done. The final confrontation happened at the cabin. Nathan showed up unannounced one weekend, drunk and angry. He stormed up onto the porch where I was reading, coincidentally, in Grandpa's favorite chair. "Happy now," he slurred. "You've turned everyone against me. My own family. Even Ashley. You did that yourself, Nathan. I was supposed to be the successful one," he shouted. "The achiever. Not you with your—" He gestured wildly at the cabin, "your special connection with Grandpa and your moral high ground. Get out," I said quietly, standing up. "You're not welcome here anymore." He laughed bitterly. "Just like Grandpa. Always so disappointed in me. Never good enough, was I?" "Grandpa was never disappointed in you, Nathan. He was disappointed in your choices. There's a difference." "Whatever." He stumbled down the porch steps. "Keep the damn cabin. Keep all of it. I'm done with this family anyway." As I watched him drive away, recklessly, but I no longer felt responsible for his choices, I remembered something Grandpa once told me: sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is knowing when to let them go. I found another of Grandpa's recordings that evening, one I hadn't noticed before. The timestamp showed it was made just days before his death. "Ava," his voice was tired but clear, "if you're watching this, then things have probably gotten difficult with Nathan. I want you to remember something: protecting what's precious sometimes means making hard choices. The cabin is more than wood and land, it's a testament to what we value. Don't let anyone turn it into just another asset to be fought over." I sat in the growing darkness, listening to the lap of waves against the shore. Tomorrow, I would need to deal with the aftermath, talk to my parents, consult with lawyers, begin the process of healing. But for now, I sat with the weight of what had happened, and the strange lightness that comes with knowing you've done what's right, even when it hurts. The lake was silver in the moonlight, unchanging despite all our human dramas. Somewhere out in the darkness, a loon called, a long, lonely sound that seemed to echo the ache in my heart. Not for the brother I'd lost, but for the brother he could have been, if he'd only chosen differently. You were right, Grandpa, I whispered to the night. Some things are worth fighting for, even if you have to fight alone. 2 months after Nathan's drunken outburst at the cabin, I received an unexpected call from Thompson, Grandpa's lawyer. Ava, there's something you should know, he said. Your grandfather left one final document with explicit instructions not to share it unless Nathan attempted legal action against the property transfer. What kind of document? A video deposition detailing Nathan's past attempts to manipulate him for financial gain, including evidence of forged signatures on other documents. He also documented Nathan's unauthorized use of the cabin for parties that resulted in significant property damage. Thompson paused. Your grandfather was thorough, Ava. He kept security camera footage, repair bills, everything. The next day, I called an emergency family meeting at the cabin. My parents, Lily, and Ashley all came. Nathan, unsurprisingly, didn't respond to the invitation. Before we begin, I said, connecting my laptop to the TV, you need to see something. The video started playing. Grandpa sat in his study, looking directly into the camera. His voice was strong, his eyes clear and determined. If you're watching this, it means Nathan has chosen greed over family, just as I feared he might. I've spent years watching him manipulate others for financial gain, always justifying his actions as business decisions. I've kept quiet to protect him, hoping he would change. That was my mistake. What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence, security footage showing Nathan's unauthorized parties at the cabin, documents with clearly forged signatures, bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals from Grandpa's accounts that Nathan had later repaid when confronted. My mother was crying by the end. Dad sat in stunned silence. Ashley looked sick. There's more, I said quietly, sharing the additional evidence Thompson had provided. Nathan's recent legal challenge wasn't just about the cabin. He was trying to challenge Grandpa's mental competency to invalidate other financial decisions as well. What other decisions? Dad asked hoarsely. Grandpa had been quietly funding environmental conservation projects. Nathan found out and tried to stop him, claiming it was wasting his inheritance. I pulled out the final document. This is Grandpa's last amendment to his will. If Nathan contested any of his decisions, a significant portion of the estate would go to those conservation projects instead. He's lost everything, Ashley whispered. No, I corrected her. He gave it away, choice by choice. The next morning, I had my locks changed and installed a new security system at the cabin. A week later, Nathan's company announced his voluntary resignation following an internal audit. Apparently, Grandpa's video had inspired others to look more closely at Nathan's business practices. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Ashley, in an attempt to heal her own guilt, wrote a detailed blog post about emotional manipulation and financial elder abuse, using her experience with Nathan as a case study. Though she never named him directly, the post went viral in our business community. Nathan's professional reputation was finished. I ran into him one last time at a local coffee shop. He looked disheveled, his designer clothes replaced by worn jeans and an old t-shirt. When he saw me, his face contorted with anger. Satisfied, he spat. You've destroyed my life. I met his gaze calmly. No, Nathan. Grandpa gave you every chance to be better. I gave you every chance to make things right. You chose this path yourself. He never loved me like he loved you, Nathan said bitterly. He loved us both, I replied. He just saw us more clearly than we saw ourselves. I walked away then, leaving my brother with his bitterness and broken dreams. It wasn't triumph I felt, but a deep sadness for what could have been, mixed with the certainty that this ending was necessary. That evening, I sat on the cabin's porch with Lily, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. You okay? She asked.
Yeah,
I said, surprised to find it was true. It needed to happen. You know what this place needs? Lily said after a while. Kids. Laughter. New memories to balance out the hard ones. She was right. The cabin had been a sanctuary of healing for me, but perhaps it was time for it to be more. I thought about Ashley's blog post and the messages she'd received from other families dealing with similar issues. What if we turned this place into something bigger? I asked. Not just a family cabin, but a retreat center? A place where other families dealing with trauma and betrayal could come to heal? Lily's eyes lit up. Using Grandpa's environmental principles as part of the healing process. Teaching people to find peace in nature, just like he taught me. Over the next few months, the idea took shape. I worked with environmental consultants to ensure the retreat center would maintain the cabin's harmony with nature. Lily helped with the legal paperwork. Even my parents, slowly healing from their own sense of failure with Nathan, contributed ideas and support. 1 year later, I stood on the dock, watching the first retreat participants arrive. They were a family dealing with their own history of betrayal and loss, seeking the same healing I had found here. Looking out over the lake, I felt Grandpa's presence stronger than ever. He had given me not just a cabin, but a purpose. A way to turn pain into growth, loss into opportunity, endings into beginnings. A pair of loons called from somewhere across the water, their haunting cry carrying through the evening air. Above me, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, bright and unwavering. Like the truth. Like justice. Like hope. I turned away from the lake and walked up to greet my guests, ready to share the healing power of this place with others who needed it. The cabin had taught me that sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. That strength isn't about never being hurt, but about what you choose to build from the wreckage. Nathan had chosen his path. I had chosen mine. And in that choice, I had found not just survival, but triumph, not in destroying him, but in creating something beautiful from the ashes of what he tried to destroy. The evening light caught the windows of the cabin, making them glow like beacons in the gathering dusk. It was time to begin again.